German KSK versus British SAS, two of Europe's most elite special operations units. Both forged through some of the most demanding selection processes ever designed. Both have proven themselves in the mountains of Afghanistan, in hostage rescues that made headlines, and in classified operations we'll never hear about. But when NATO planners designed an exercise that would push both units to their absolute limits in the European Alps, something happened that nobody predicted. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. The outcome of this exercise wasn't determined by physical fitness. It wasn't determined by marksmanship. It wasn't even determined by tactical brilliance. It was determined by something so subtle that most military analysts completely missed it when reviewing the after-action reports. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why one of these units completed the primary objective while the other was forced to adapt their entire approach mid-mission. And here's the part that's going to challenge everything you think you know about German versus British military culture. The unit that succeeded did so by abandoning their greatest strength. The unit that struggled did so by relying too heavily on theirs. Stay with me, because this story reveals a truth about special operations that applies far beyond the mountains of Europe. The Bavarian Alps, altitude ranging from 2,000 to nearly 3,000 meters. Early March, the conditions are brutal. Temperatures swing from -15 Celsius at night to +5 during the day. That temperature variation matters more than you think, and I'll explain why in about 10 minutes. The snowpack is unstable. Avalanche risk is constant. Visibility shifts from crystal clear to complete whiteout within minutes. This is where NATO conducts exercise Alpine Resolve, a multinational mountain warfare training event that's been running in various forms since the 1980s. The exercise parameters are straightforward on paper. 4-man teams from each unit must navigate 40 kilometers through high-altitude terrain. They must locate and secure a simulated high-value target. They must extract to a designated point while evading an opposing force playing enemy combatants. They have 72 hours, no vehicle support, no helicopter extraction until the endpoint, limited resupply. The mountains will test everything. Now let me tell you about these two units, because understanding their origins explains everything that happens next. The Kommando Spezialkräfte, the KSK, was established in 1996. That makes them relatively young compared to the SAS, but don't let that fool you. The KSK inherited a mountain warfare tradition that stretches back over a century through the Bundeswehr's Gebirgsjäger. The German mountain troops, these mountain infantry units were legendary in both world wars. They operated in the Caucasus, in Norway, in the Italian Alps. The institutional knowledge embedded in German military mountain doctrine is immense. When the KSK was formed, they didn't start from zero. They built upon generations of Alpine expertise. KSK selection has a pass rate of under 10%. Candidates endure a 90-day assessment that includes extensive mountain phases. They train regularly in Bavaria, in the Austrian Alps, and have conducted real-world operations in the Hindu Kush Mountains of Afghanistan. These operators know mountains. The Special Air Service needs no introduction. Founded in 1941, the SAS has operated in virtually every type of terrain on Earth. But here's something most people don't consider. The SAS mountain warfare experience is different from the German approach. British forces developed their high-altitude doctrine through colonial operations, through conflicts in Malaya, Borneo, Oman, and later the Falklands. The SAS didn't grow up in the Alps. They adapted to mountains as one of many environments they needed to master. Their approach reflects this. Where the Germans developed doctrines specifically for Alpine operations, the British developed a more generalist doctrine that could be applied anywhere. SAS selection also has a pass rate under 10%. Their infamous fan dance and long drag through the Brecon Beacons in Wales test candidates in mountain conditions. But the Brecons are not the Alps. The altitude is lower. Technical climbing demands are different. The SAS compensates with their legendary adaptability and what they call improvised tactical flexibility. They figure things out. They overcome. They dare. And they win. So we have German precision meeting British adaptability. A unit bred for these specific mountains meeting a unit bred to conquer any mountain. On paper, you'd assume the Germans have the advantage. They're in their backyard. The terrain is familiar. The altitude is something they've trained at hundreds of times. If I asked you right now to predict the outcome, most of you would bet on the KSK. And that prediction would reveal exactly why this exercise became a case study in special operations training. because the obvious answer is almost never the right answer. Let me set up the exact parameters because the details matter. Each four-man team carried approximately 35 kilograms of equipment, standard patrol load plus mountain-specific gear, ropes, ice axes, crampons, avalanche transceivers. Both teams had equivalent equipment. This wasn't about gear advantages. Communication was limited to scheduled radio windows every 6 hours. Between those windows, the teams were on their own. The route included 3 significant technical sections: glacier crossing, a mixed rock and ice ascent, and a high-altitude ridge traverse exposed to extreme winds. The simulated opposing force consisted of 12 operators who knew the terrain intimately. Evading them while completing objectives would require both tactical skill and environmental mastery. The exercise began at 0600 on day 1. Both teams were inserted at separate starting points equidistant from the objective, and within the first 4 hours, the fundamental differences in approach became visible. The KSK team moved with mechanical precision. Their route planning was immaculate. They had studied topographical maps for weeks. They knew the optimal paths, the safe zones, the danger areas. Their movement technique reflected generations of German mountain doctrine: consistent pace, regular rest intervals, systematic hydration and nutrition protocols. They covered ground efficiently. Their navigation was flawless. At the 4-hour mark, they had completed 22% of the route with 0 deviation from their plan. The SAS team took a different approach. Rather than following a predetermined route, they moved in what observers described as adaptive bounds. Short movements followed by observation and reassessment. They were reading the mountain in real time, adjusting their path based on what they saw, rather than what they had planned. At the 4-hour mark, they had completed only 18% of the route. They had already deviated from their original plan twice. From a purely efficiency standpoint, the Germans were winning. But efficiency isn't everything in the mountains. Remember that. Hour 8 brought the first real challenge: glacier crossing. Now I need you to understand something about glaciers, because this is where the exercise started to reveal deeper truths. A glacier is not just ice. A glacier is a living, moving, constantly changing environment. Crevasses open and close. Snow bridges that were solid yesterday can collapse today. The surface conditions shift with temperature. And here's the critical factor. The KSK team had crossed this glacier before, multiple times. Their intelligence package included detailed crevasse mapping from previous exercises. They knew where the dangers were, or at least where the dangers had been. The SAS team had never seen this glacier. They had general glacier travel training, certainly, but they had no specific intelligence about this particular crossing. Conventional wisdom says this gives the KSK a massive advantage. Conventional wisdom is wrong. Watch what happens. The KSK team approached the glacier with confidence. They knew this terrain. They roped up according to standard protocol, established their crossing formation, began movement using their mapped route that had worked perfectly 3 years prior. What they didn't know was that the glacier had changed. Climate variations over recent years had shifted the crevasse patterns. A route that was safe in 2020 was now compromised. The KSK team was operating on outdated intelligence, and they didn't know it because they trusted their knowledge of the terrain. The SAS team approached the same glacier with what commanders later described as productive paranoia. They had no knowledge to rely on, so they relied on observation instead. They spent 45 minutes studying the glacier before crossing. They probed the snow with their ice axes. They looked for the subtle signs of hidden crevasses. They moved slower, but they moved with real-time awareness. The KSK team hit trouble 16 minutes into their crossing. One operator broke through a snow bridge into a crevasse. The fall was only 4 meters, arrested by the rope system. No injuries. Textbook rescue procedure. Extracted their teammate in 11 minutes. But that 11-minute delay rippled through their entire timeline. More importantly, it shook something that's difficult to measure, but critical to performance. It shook their confidence in their plan. The SAS team completed their glacier crossing without incident. It took them 30% longer than the KSK's planned time. But they crossed with 0 emergencies and full confidence intact. This is where I need to introduce a concept that explains everything that follows. Military psychologists call it plan attachment disorder. When an operator or a team becomes so invested in their predetermined plan, that they struggle to adapt when reality diverges from expectation. The better the plan, the more dangerous this becomes. Because when you spent weeks perfecting a plan, when that plan is based on expertise and knowledge and experience, abandoning it feels like abandoning everything you know. The KSK team had a brilliant plan. The mountain didn't care about their plan. Hour 14. Night operations. Both teams are now navigating in darkness through complex terrain. The temperature has dropped to -18. Wind speeds are increasing. The KSK team is still following their timeline, pushing to make up for the delay at the glacier. They're moving faster than conditions advise. This is where German precision becomes German rigidity. Their doctrine emphasizes scheduled discipline. Being late to checkpoints cascades through entire operations. In conventional military operations, this discipline is an asset. In the mountains at night, in deteriorating weather, it becomes a liability. The SAS team made a decision that looked like weakness, but was actually wisdom. They halted. Out hour 14. When they should have been moving according to any reasonable operational timeline, they found a sheltered position and stopped. They built a snow shelter. They rested. They waited for dawn. A German observer embedded with the exercise controllers later wrote that this decision appeared to surrender tactical initiative. The SAS team leader reportedly responded that the mountain already has the initiative. We're just acknowledging it. By hour 18, the consequences of both decisions became clear. The KSK team, exhausted from night movement in brutal conditions, reached the technical climbing section as dawn broke. They were on schedule. They were also depleted. Two team members were showing early signs of fatigue-related decision impairment. Their movements were slower than training standards. Their communication was becoming abbreviated in ways that suggested cognitive load. The SAS team arrived at the same section 90 minutes later. They had slept for 4 hours. They were warm, fed, mentally sharp. The delay that looked like weakness had become a tactical advantage. And here's where the exercise delivered its real lesson. The technical section was a mixed rock and ice climb of approximately 200 meters. Not extreme by mountaineering standards, but demanding enough that it required precision, focus, and teamwork. The KSK team, despite their fatigue, began to climb according to doctrine. Standard rope techniques, standard communication protocols, standard movement patterns, everything by the book. And they struggled. Not because they lacked skill. These were expert climbers. They struggled because exhausted operators make small errors, and small errors in technical terrain create cascading problems. A missed placement here, suboptimal belay position there. Nothing dangerous individually, but collectively, it slowed them dramatically. The SAS team watched the terrain before climbing, identified a variation from the standard route that avoided the most technical section, that added lateral distance, but reduced vertical complexity. A German observer noted that this variation wasn't in the standard approach for this section. The SAS team leader's response is worth quoting. He said their approach was simple. The mission was to reach the top, not to climb the hardest route. If you're enjoying this breakdown and want to see more Elite Forces analysis, make sure you're subscribed. I'm releasing a video next week about why. French GIGN and German GSG-9 developed completely opposite approaches to hostage rescue, and the results from their last joint exercise were genuinely shocking. But right now, let's get back to our teams because the next 12 hours changed everything. Hour 26. Both teams have completed the technical section and are approaching the objective area. The KSK team is 2 hours behind their planned schedule. More significantly, they've consumed emergency rations intended for the extraction phase. Their buffer is gone. The SAS team is 4 hours behind the KSK's original planned schedule. But they're on their own schedule, and they're ahead of it. They have full reserves. The simulated high-value target was located in a mountain structure. Both teams needed to approach, secure the target, and extract. This phase tested tactical skills rather than mountain skills. And here's where the exercise revealed its final twist. The KSK team executed a textbook approach. Their assault methodology was flawless. These are Tier 1 operators, and it showed. They secured the objective in 8 minutes with 0 simulated casualties. Technically perfect. But they had taken a route that the opposing force had predicted. Because the opposing force knew how German doctrine approached these scenarios. The KSK was caught in a simulated ambush during extraction. The exercise controllers ruled 2 operators as casualties. The mission was technically a success, but at 50% team losses. The SAS approach was different. Rather than following doctrinal assault patterns, they spent 3 hours conducting close target reconnaissance. This seemed like wasted time. It wasn't. They identified the opposing force positions. They found an approach vector that doctrine would unsuggest, because doctrine could unaccount for the specific terrain features they discovered. Their assault took 14 minutes instead of 8. Slower, less elegant. But they extracted with 0 simulated casualties. So, who won? This is where the exercise becomes truly instructive, because the answer depends entirely on how you define victory. By objective completion metrics, both teams succeeded. Both secured the target. Both extracted to the endpoint.
Right.
The KSK arrived first. They completed the exercise in 68 hours. The SAS completed in 71 hours. Speed is victory, Germany wins. By casualty metrics, the SAS performed better. 0 losses versus 50% losses. But preservation of force is victory, Britain wins. By doctrinal adherence, the KSK performed better. They followed their training precisely. If execution of doctrine is victory, Germany wins. By adaptive performance, the SAS performed better. They modified their approach continuously based on conditions. If flexibility is victory, Britain wins. The exercise commanders ultimately scored it as a draw, but the real lessons weren't in the scoring. The real lessons emerged in the after-action analysis. Let me share what the German observers concluded about their own team, because this demonstrates remarkable institutional honesty. The report stated that KSK operators demonstrated exceptional technical proficiency and doctrinal discipline. However, the exercise revealed potential over-reliance on pre-planned approaches and historical terrain knowledge. When conditions diverged from expectations, adaptation was slower than optimal. The team's greatest strength, their systematic methodology, became a constraint when the system encountered variables it hadn't accounted for. The British observers were equally honest. They reported that SAS operators demonstrated exceptional adaptability and real-time decision-making. However, the exercise revealed potential underutilization of available intelligence and planning resources. Time spent on reconnaissance and assessment, while ultimately valuable, might be reduced through better integration of pre-mission intelligence. The team's greatest strength, their flexibility, sometimes manifested as inefficiency when more structured approaches would have sufficed. Do you see what happened here? Both teams succeeded. Both teams identified weaknesses. Neither team was superior. They were different, and those differences matter. Because the future of special operations isn't German versus British. It's German and British. It's precision integrated with adaptability. It's doctrine informed by flexibility. It's planning enhanced by real-time observation. NATO exercises like Alpine Resolve exist precisely to reveal these complementary capabilities. The German approach works brilliantly when conditions match expectations. When intelligence is accurate, when the environment behaves as predicted, the British approach works brilliantly when conditions are unknown. When intelligence is limited, when the environment refuses to cooperate with human plans, the real question for military planners isn't which approach is better. It's how do we build teams and doctrines that can switch between approaches as conditions demand. Let me tell you why this matters beyond the exercise. Because this isn't just about German and British special forces. This is about a fundamental tension in how we prepare for complex challenges. Every military in the world faces this tension. Every organization faces it. Plan thoroughly or adapt continuously. Trust your preparation or trust your observation. Follow the system or follow your instincts. The answer is never one or the other. The answer is always both, deployed appropriately. The Germans have spent the years since this exercise integrating more adaptive decision-making into their mountain warfare doctrine. KSK now trains specifically on scenarios where pre-planned approaches must be abandoned. They've developed what they call flexible, systematic methodology, which sounds like a contradiction, but represents a genuine evolution. The British have gone the other direction. SAS mountain training now incorporates more detailed pre-mission planning and intelligence integration. The VA recognize that their legendary adaptability is more powerful when it's built on a foundation of thorough preparation. The exchange programs between these units have increased significantly since 2020. German operators spend time with British mountain leaders. British operators attend German Gebirgsjäger courses. The knowledge flows both ways. Yeah. And this brings me to the deeper point of this entire analysis. Special operations capability isn't about finding the best unit. It's about building the best network of units that complement each other's strengths and compensate for each other's limitations. The KSK brings precision, planning, and systematic excellence. The SAS brings adaptability, improvisation, and flexible problem solving. Together, they represent a capability set that neither possesses alone. This is what NATO is actually about. Not standardization that erases these differences, but integration that leverages them. I want you to think about the operators in this exercise because their experience illustrates something profound about professional development. The KSK operators who participated didn't fail. They completed the mission, but they encountered the limits of their approach, and that encounter was more valuable than any number of exercises where everything went according to plan. You don't learn your limitations by succeeding. You learn them by being forced to adapt. The SAS operators didn't win. They completed the mission with a different set of trade-offs. But they too encountered limits. Their approach consumed more time. In a scenario with a tighter timeline, their methodology might have failed where the German approach succeeded. Both teams emerged from the exercise with enhanced capability because both teams experienced productive failure. Moments where their default approaches were insufficient and they had to reach for something else. This is how elite units stay elite, not by protecting their methods from challenge, but by deliberately exposing them to conditions that reveal weaknesses. The exercise wasn't designed to determine a winner. It was designed to make both teams better, and it succeeded. Since this exercise, both units have modified their mountain warfare doctrine. Both have integrated lessons learned. Both have developed new training protocols that address the specific limitations revealed in the Alps. This is institutional. Learning at the highest level, and here's what this means for the future. Mountain warfare is becoming more important, not less. Afghanistan demonstrated that special operations forces need genuine high-altitude capability. Future conflict scenarios in Central Asia, in the Caucasus, potentially even in the European Alps themselves, will demand forces that can operate effectively at altitude. The militaries that will succeed are those that have honestly assessed their capabilities and deliberately addressed their limitations. The Germans and British have done this. They've used exercises like Alpine resolve not to compete, but to improve. They've shared lessons across national boundaries. They've built relationships between operators that will matter when real operations demand multinational cooperation. The instant regret in this scenario wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a catastrophic failure or an emergency extraction. It was subtler than that. It was the moment when the KSK team realized their trusted plan wasn't working. It was the moment when the SAS team realized their flexible approach was consuming time they might not have. It was the moment when both teams confronted the gap between their self-image and their actual performance. That moment of recognition is where growth begins. Every professional, in every field, faces moments like this. Moments when your trusted methods prove insufficient. Moments when you realize that expertise in one domain doesn't automatically transfer to another. The professionals who grow are those who treat these moments as information rather than failure. So what's the takeaway from German KSK versus British SAS in the mountains? Neither unit is definitively better. Both units are exceptional at what they do. The exercise revealed complementary strengths and parallel limitations. More importantly, it revealed the value of honest assessment and the importance of learning from partners who approach challenges differently. The German precision that seemed like an advantage became a constraint when conditions changed. The British flexibility that seemed like an advantage consumed resources that might have been critical under different parameters. Both approaches have value. Both approaches have limits. The wisdom is in knowing when to apply each. And that wisdom only comes from experience, from exercises that test your limits, and from honest reflection on what those exercises reveal. I've been analyzing these elite forces comparisons for years, and this is what I find most inspiring. The willingness of these units to expose themselves to challenging conditions and learn from the results. The humility to recognize limitations. The professionalism to address those limitations systematically. The openness to learn from allies who do things differently. That's what makes special operations forces special. It's not invincibility, not perfection. The relentless pursuit of improvement through honest self-assessment. If you want to see more of these analyses, hit that subscribe button. I'm releasing new content every week, and the next video is going to examine why American Delta Force and British SAS developed completely different selection philosophies despite sharing the same operational heritage. The divergence happened for reasons that will surprise you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Which unit did you expect to perform better in this exercise? Were you surprised by the outcome? And what other elite forces comparisons do you want to see? I read every comment, and your suggestions shape future content. Until next time, stay sharp out there. And remember, the best operators aren't those who never fail. They're those who learn more from failure than their competitors do. That's what separates good from great in special operations. And that's what this exercise was really about.